All right, so we have a really interesting deep dive today.
Yeah.
All about the keto diet.
It's a hot topic.
Yeah, it's super popular these days, and I think, you know,
Everybody's talking about it.
everyone's talking about it. I feel like it's one of those things, people are like, should I do it? Is it right for me? And
Right.
and you've sent some really great articles about, both sides of it, so I think we can really dive in.
Absolutely. And really what we want to get into is beyond just the simple yes or no answer.
Yeah.
Looking at these articles, I think we can really help the listener figure out what works best for their body.
Exactly. What are some of the signs that it's working? What are some of the signs that it's not?
Right.
So first of all, I guess, why is it so popular? Like, what is the appeal?
Well, I think a big reason is the weight loss potential.
Okay.
Keto basically switches your body's fuel source from carbs to fat, a state called ketosis.
So you're basically retraining your metabolism
Exactly.
to burn fat for energy.
Yeah. And one of the articles, Keto Clarity, dives into the science behind it.
Okay.
It explains that by drastically reducing your carb intake,
Yeah.
you deplete your body's glycogen stores, and it forces your body to turn to fat as its primary energy source.
Interesting. Okay, so that's the basic premise, but it's not quite as simple as just like cutting carbs and eating tons of bacon, right?
You got it.
Okay.
The articles also highlight some of the risks and drawbacks.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure you understand both sides of it.
Okay, so what are some of the risks? What should people be considering?
Well, one of the articles, Keto Concerns, stresses that it's really important to consult a doctor
Okay.
before making any drastic dietary changes, especially if you have a history of certain medical conditions.
Like, what kind of conditions are we talking about?
Things like, digestive issues,
Okay.
eating disorders, kidney disease, or type 1 diabetes.
Got it.
These are all red flags that warrant a conversation with your healthcare provider before you just jump right into keto.
Yeah, because it could potentially worsen those conditions
Exactly.
or create new complications.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
And, your health and safety have to come before any potential weight loss.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So even if someone gets the green light from their doctor, are there other signs they should watch out for?
Absolutely.
That might suggest that keto isn't a good fit.
Several of the articles detail, pretty clear indicators that even if you don't have any pre-existing conditions,
Okay.
that keto might not be working for you.
What are some of those?
So, for example, Keto Clarity mentions digestive distress as a common early warning sign.
Okay, now I have to ask, because some of the details are a little, graphic in these articles.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like floating stool bloating, a lot of burping and belching.
Right.
Is this something that people actually experience?
It's definitely not uncommon.
Right.
The high fat content of the diet can be kind of a shock to the system. And some people experience these kinds of digestive issues as their bodies adjust.
Okay, so I can imagine feeling like a balloon after every meal wouldn't be a very motivating factor to stick with the diet.
Right. It's a sign that your body might be struggling to process all that fat.
And speaking of trouble processing fat, these articles also mention some potential issues with the gallbladder.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I never really thought about my gallbladder until I started reading about keto.
It's easy to overlook, but it plays a crucial role in digesting fat.
Okay.
Keto Concerns explains that this high fat intake can put a lot of stress on the gallbladder,
Okay.
leading to some unexpected pain.
Unexpected in what way?
Well, most people think of gallbladder pain as being on the right side of the abdomen.
Right.
But it can actually show up in some other areas,
Like where?
like at the right shoulder, under the right rib cage, or even between the shoulder blade and the spine.
Wow, I would never have connected those things.
Yeah, it can be surprising.
So if someone starts experiencing those kinds of pains after going keto, that's a sign to talk to their doctor.
Absolutely. It could be a sign that their gallbladder is struggling to keep up with the high fat demands of the diet.
Okay, so we have digestive distress, gallbladder issues so far.
Oh.
Are there any other red flags that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, hormonal changes are another important thing to consider,
Okay,
particularly for women.
right.
Keto and hormones specifically addresses the impact of keto on the menstrual cycle.
Okay,
It suggests that irregular periods,
okay.
or even a missed period when you're not pregnant, could be a sign that keto is disrupting your hormone balance.
Interesting.
Yeah, the restrictive nature of keto can really interfere with the balance of hormones.
And speaking of things being out of whack,
Yeah.
what about the scale?
Right,
I mean, a lot of people go on keto to lose weight.
right.
So what if the scale isn't budging, or even worse, going up?
Yeah, that's a big sign that something's not working.
Right.
It's important to remember that keto isn't a magic bullet. Even on a high-fat diet, if you're eating more calories than you're burning, you're probably going to gain weight.
So even though you're burning fat for energy, you can still store fat if you're overeating.
Exactly.
Interesting.
That's where it gets tricky with keto.
Right.
You really got to pay attention to your overall calorie intake
Okay.
and make sure you're not exceeding what your body needs.
Keto Clarity actually had a really interesting section on calculating your ideal fat intake
Oh, yeah?
on keto.
Yeah.
It talked about using a keto calculator to determine,
Right.
based on your height and weight and activity level and goals,
That's it.
how much fat you should actually be consuming.
And you know what that does is that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. I think that would be really helpful for someone who's just starting out and they're like,
Right.
I don't know how to do this.
And the article also recommends tracking your macros using a calorie tracking app,
Sure.
which can help you stay on top of your fat intake and make adjustments if you need to.
Okay, so we've talked about some physical signs that keto might not be working.
Right.
What about the mental and emotional impact?
Yeah, that's a great point.
I know from personal experience that restrictive diets can sometimes create kind of an unhealthy relationship with food.
For sure.
So how does keto play into that?
Well, several of the articles touch on this too. And keto and mental health specifically explores some of the psychological challenges of keto.
Okay.
And, one of the biggest dangers is the cheat day.
Oh, the cheat day.
You know, that whole cycle of restriction and then binging,
I've been there.
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
That can lead to feeling guilty,
Hmm.
ashamed, and ultimately just feeling like a failure.
Right, like you're constantly starting over on Monday.
Exactly. And it's not just cheat days.
Right.
Keto can also be isolating.
How so?
It can be really difficult to participate in social gatherings and share meals with friends and family.
I can see how that would be tough.
Yeah.
If you're constantly having to think about what you can and can't eat.
Right. And you don't want food to be a source of stress.
Exactly.
And, another thing is if you're constantly feeling like you're waiting to stop the diet,
Yeah.
it's probably not the right approach for you long term.
It's like you're white-knuckling it until the end date.
Exactly. Sustainability is key.
Right, because you want something that you can actually live with.
Absolutely. It's not about a quick fix.
Right.
It's about developing a healthy and balanced relationship with food that you can maintain over time.
Yeah. It's about lifestyle change.
Exactly.
Right.
And, speaking of balance,
Yeah.
these articles also talk about the risk of nutrient deficiencies on keto.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, when you're so focused on cutting carbs and upping your fat intake, it's easy to miss out on some essential vitamins and minerals
Right.
that you'd normally get from fruits, veggies, and whole grains.
It's like too much of a good thing.
Exactly.
Could be a bad thing.
Keto Concerns actually breaks down some specific deficiencies that can happen, like fiber, vitamin C, potassium, magnesium.
And I imagine those deficiencies can lead to a bunch of other health problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fiber is so important for digestion, vitamin C for your immune system, potassium for your muscles, and magnesium plays a role in hundreds of bodily processes.
So it's really not just about weight loss. It's
Okay.
about your overall health.
Exactly.
So before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about listening to your body's signals.
Yeah.
What are some more subtle cues that might suggest keto isn't working, even if someone isn't having those obvious digestive issues?
Well, Keto Clarity talks about how important it is to pay attention to your heart rate,
Okay.
particularly how it responds after you eat.
Okay.
A rapid or irregular heartbeat could be a sign that your body is having trouble adjusting.
So it's not just about what you see in the mirror or on the scale.
Right.
It's about tuning into those internal cues too.
Exactly. And another thing to pay attention to is changes in your stool.
Okay.
I know we talked about some of the less pleasant side effects,
Mhm.
but even subtle shifts in color consistency or oiliness could be a red flag.
What would those changes indicate?
For example, pale or oily stools could mean your body isn't absorbing fats properly,
Okay.
which can lead to nutrient deficiencies.
Right, right.
And on the other hand, if your stool is black or tarry, that's a sign of a more serious problem, and you should see a doctor immediately.
Got it. So it's really about being aware of any changes in your normal bathroom habits and talking to your doctor if anything seems off.
Exactly. Our bodies are talking to us all the time.
Yeah.
We just have to listen.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a minute and talk about some alternatives to keto.
Sure.
Because if someone realizes it's not the right fit, what else is out there?
Well, thankfully, there are a lot of other paths to wellness.
Okay.
The articles mention the Mediterranean diet, WW, and the flexitarian diet?
I've heard a lot about the Mediterranean diet. Isn't that supposed to be one of the healthiest in the world?
It is, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Mediterranean Marvels goes into detail about it, and it really emphasizes whole, unprocessed foods.
Like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and healthy fats like olive oil.
So it's less about restriction and more about eating a variety of good foods.
Exactly. And one of the things I love about the Mediterranean diet is that it's not just about physical health,
Yeah.
also about enjoying food and sharing meals with people,
Right.
which can be hard to do on a restrictive diet like keto.
Yeah, for sure. So what about WW? I know they've changed their focus to be more about overall wellness,
Right.
but I'm not really sure how the program works now.
Well, WW Beyond Weight Loss does a good job of explaining their updated approach.
Okay.
It's based on a personalized points system.
Okay.
Each food has a point value based on its nutritional content, and you get a daily budget of points to work with.
So it's kind of like counting calories,
Huh.
but it takes the nutritional value of the food into account.
Exactly, and it helps you make informed choices about what you eat.
Okay.
Plus, they offer a ton of support and resources like workshops, online communities, and coaching to help you stay on track. And what about the flexitarian diet? What is that all about?
It's like a more relaxed form of vegetarianism.
Okay.
Flexing your food choices describes it as a mostly plant-based diet that lets you have meat sometimes.
Okay.
You focus on fruits, veggies, whole grains, and legumes, but you don't have to cut out meat completely.
So it's about finding that balance between healthy eating and still enjoying the foods you love.
Exactly.
That's great.
And that's really the key takeaway here. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to eating healthy.
Right.
It's all about finding what works for your body and your lifestyle.
And listening to those internal cues we talked about.
Absolutely. Your body is your best guide.
Okay, now I know we touched on this before, but I want to go back to the idea of net carbs
Okay.
because I'm still not totally clear on what that means.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's not just about cutting out all carbs.
You're right. It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Keto clarity actually has a really good explanation of net carbs.
Okay, what does it say?
Basically, it's the total carbs in a food minus the fiber.
So you subtract the fiber from the total carb count.
Right, because fiber is a type of carb that your body can't digest.
Oh, okay.
It passes through your system without raising your blood sugar or affecting ketosis.
So when people talk about staying under a certain number of carbs on keto, they're really talking about net carbs.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to read food labels carefully
Right.
and look at both the total carbs and the fiber.
Okay, that makes more sense now, and I bet that makes a big difference in terms of staying in ketosis.
It absolutely does.
So we've talked about some downsides of keto, the importance of listening to your body, and some other diet options.
Right,
But I want to acknowledge that keto does work for some people.
it does.
These articles have lots of stories from people who lost weight, improved their health, and felt more energized on keto.
That's true, and I think it's important to recognize that it can be an effective tool for some, especially people struggling with obesity or metabolic conditions,
Okay.
but they should be working closely with their doctor.
Right, so it's not about saying keto is bad.
No, not at all.
It's about knowing the risks and being cautious.
Exactly. And remember, weight loss is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
True health is about taking care of your mind and body and finding a way of eating that supports all of that.
Okay, so it sounds like personalized nutrition is really the key takeaway here.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
There's no one right way to eat.
I love that perspective. It takes the pressure off of trying to find the perfect diet.
Exactly. And one of the articles, Intuitive Eating, A Guide to Food Freedom, talks about this idea of listening to your body
Okay.
and learning to trust your own intuition when it comes to food.
So it's really about tuning out all the noise and figuring out what feels good for you.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into keto, what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember?
Don't get caught up in the hype of any diet.
Okay.
Approach your nutrition journey with curiosity and be kind to yourself.
I like that.
Pay attention to how different foods make you feel. Explore different ways of eating. And don't be afraid to ask for help from a registered dietitian.
It's about finding that balance between nourishing your body and enjoying your food.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs, but the key is to stay curious, stay informed, and stay connected to your own body.
That's a great way to end this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another insightful exploration.
Okay, so it sounds like personalized nutrition is really the key takeaway here.
Absolutely. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
There's no one right way to eat.
I love that perspective. It takes the pressure off of trying to find the perfect diet.
Exactly. And one of the articles, Intuitive Eating, A Guide to Food Freedom, talks about this idea of listening to your body
Okay.
and learning to trust your own intuition when it comes to food.
So it's really about tuning out all the noise and figuring out what feels good for you.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive into keto, what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember?
Don't get caught up in the hype of any diet.
Okay,
Approach your nutrition journey with curiosity and be kind to yourself.
I like that.
Pay attention to how different foods make you feel. Explore different ways of eating, and don't be afraid to ask for help from a registered dietitian.
It's about finding that balance between nourishing your body and enjoying your food.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs. But the key is to stay curious, stay informed, and stay connected to your own body.
That's a great way to end this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another insightful exploration.